Hi, hello, welcome to Man with a Mentor. I am the man, your host, Matthew Barnard, and you may be wondering what a show called Man with a Mentor is about. And basically, it's about people and as they grow up and change and evolve, and they decide what they want to do with their lives, and they just hit it hard, pursue it, and make it work, and have a great, passionate career as they move forward in their lives. And that was a long explanation, but I think it was pretty good. So I'm here today with Spencer Zembrodt. Okay. Spencer Zembrodt is a dynamic conductor, composer, and educator, serving as the artistic director of the Cincinnati Men's Chorus. He's an advocate for the arts and LGBTQ plus rights in Cincinnati and beyond, with bachelor's and master's degrees in music from the University of Louisville and the State University of New York, respectively. So that's you.
That's me.
In a nutshell. So let's go back to when you were little. How did the inkling of music become in your world and overtake your thoughts?
That's always a fun question because it started before I remember. So I have to rely on, mom to tell me everything, right?
Oh, right.
And so, my mom inherited a piano from my grandmother. And then I grew up with it in the house, and everybody says that I just started playing it as soon as I could reach the keys.
Oh, right.
And so, I don't remember a time where I wasn't wanting to go up and play on the piano. And I remember stories of when I was little, I think 1 or 2 years old, just old enough to barely stand. And when the choir would sing at church, I would wave my hands in the air like I was conducting.
Oh.
And then so I started piano when I was 5.
Oh, gotcha.
And then I got a drum set maybe a year or two later for Christmas. And then when it was time for 6th grade band, it was really easy to choose percussion because it's like, hey, it's like a piano, but you hit it like a drum set. And,
Right.
and that's how you play xylophone. So
Right.
then it was all set.
Right. It's also difficult in the band to push a piano around or you know what I mean?
It's hard to march it on the field.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, it seems like, band is more, at least in the school system, more for instruments that you can carry around and take
certainly.
with you.
But that's high school marching band is where that really comes into play.
Right.
But if you're just talking like a regular old concert band, it's like an orchestra. You just sit or you stand if you're a percussionist and you play. That's all it is.
Right. So how did you stick with both equally growing up, or did you lean more towards one and kind of drop the other, or you were like, you've got 2 things here, young man, an hour of practice for each one?
Oh gosh. Well, see, that was the problem, was the practice. I quit after 3 years of piano. So there was a little bit of a gap there. And then I picked up the percussion and that kind of held me through until I got to about halfway through high school. And then I didn't want to take percussion lessons anymore. So then I went back and started taking piano lessons again. So then when college came around a couple years later, it was like, okay, which one of these am I going to do? So I applied for both, and I ended up going percussion and taking piano secondary.
Oh, right. All right. Oh, so, yeah, so it kind of got decided for you, or, well, no.
Kind of.
Right.
Circumstances always play into things, and, I was applying for piano initially, actually, and I thought it was going to be more useful in the long run.
Right.
And then I was getting scholarship money, but I wasn't getting the enthusiasm from folks because, there's so many pianists applying places. Right. And then at one of the schools, the percussion teacher was somebody that I knew. And he said, well, if you don't want him, I'll take him. And so I went for percussion.
Oh, yeah.
But not with him, actually. That's the funny part.
Oh, well, who cares? It happened.
It happened.
All meant to be that way. Now, how, when you were little, and I was joking about, practice for an hour, young man. What did it look like in terms of your, were you, obsessed? Was your mom, pulling you off the piano at 10 o'clock at night saying, go to bed? Or were you, a reluctant practicer? Or what was the regimen like?
I was not a good practicer. When you were in band, you had to practice a certain amount every week, and I usually managed to get that in, But when it was just piano lessons when I was younger, I was terrible at it. So, of course, now that I'm teaching, I'm like, you will practice because you have to. And
Right.
I'm very, very, I wouldn't say strict, but I'm very encouraging to my students to practice.
In terms of like choral versus like instrumental things, because I asked you, I was like, do you want to come and sing? And you were like, oh no. So I just thought that was interesting that you're not a singer, but now you're involved with choirs.
I mean, the thing is, I can sing,
Right.
but it's not just, just like the instruments. It's a skill, and you have to nurture that and grow that and work at it. And, when I was working on all of my degrees and everything, I can distinctly remember being in my undergrad, and, there were some choir people there that were students that were just young and a little catty. And I remember singing in the lobby, and people would give me really weird looks and say, "Are you really okay sounding like that?"
Oh no.
And so I actually stopped singing for a little bit around school just because it was traumatizing and embarrassing.
Right.
So when I got the job with the chorus, I started taking voice lessons again because, if you're gonna lead a chorus, you have to know what you're doing and you have to know what you're talking about.
Right.
And I had experience because of opera. You do a lot of opera in an orchestral conducting degree.
Oh, right.
I had done a festival where I learned choral conducting methods and took a couple voice lessons. So I knew that it was in there and that I could do it. But I started taking voice lessons, and I've taken them now for about 1.5 years, almost 2 years.
Gotcha.
And I love it. And the confidence that you get from
Right.
actually knowing what you're doing is just really remarkable.
I have another question about composing and arranging. Like, how does it come to you? Like, in terms of composing, like, do you mean like composing actual music with all sorts of different instruments, or just for the piano, or like, what do you mean by that?
Sure. So there is a difference between a composer and an arranger.
Oh.
So a composer is writing from scratch.
Right.
And then an arranger is taking something that somebody else wrote, and they're arranging it. So they're either, changing it in some way to make it different, or they're making it for different instruments and different voices. So a lot of times, if we're doing a Broadway song or like a choir song for SATB, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, I need it for tenor, baritone, bass.
Oh, right.
So it might be that I'm just finding a way to rearrange those parts to fit Allman's voices.
All right.
Or to take one solo part and how do I flesh it out so that there's harmony and maybe different interesting little tidbits that you don't get to hear when just one person is singing.
Oh, right. Okay.
So
So what do
there's-
you prefer doing? Like, I would think composing would be difficult, right? But then you also have like the freedom to do whatever you want with it, instead of like trying to mold some, I don't know what would be, like, what do you like to do?
I like both. They both have their own challenges. When you compose from scratch, it's how do I make something that nobody's ever heard before? Or how do I make something that captures the essence of this idea that I have? Whereas with arranging, it's how do I find the box? You got to stay in a certain box because you already have a melody and you already have lyrics, and people have expectations for how it might go. But how do I break those expectations too? How do I find a way outside of the box so that there's something new and fresh about it? Or maybe it's just you want the same thing for different voices. How do I stick to the original in a way that makes sense for the people who are going to have to sing it now?
I want to ask you something else about heading for a career in music. If you met someone who was like, whether they're 7 or 17 or whatever age, and you could give them one piece of advice of like, this would be the best thing to do or a good way to go, like, what would that be, and why would you say that?
I think I would say do everything. So, there's so many different facets. And, even before the interview, you and I talked a little bit about how, I have an orchestral conducting degree, but at the same time, people were getting band conducting degrees and choral conducting degrees, or you can be getting a instrument performance degree or an education or technology. There are or jazz. There are all these different degree types, and that only covers a very, very small portion of all the kinds of careers that there are in music. I know someone who his entire job is either arranging music, like we talked about, or a lot more of it is score preparation. So he's like a composer. He's using the same technology that composers would use, but he's taking scores by Hollywood composers and TV and film composers, and then he's making sure that the music looks good on the page, printing it out, and sending it back so that it can be performed in the studio. And that's a really big, high intense job. But they don't really teach you that except for like really small degree tracks.
Right.
But do everything. I mean, it's really, when you're in college, you're going to want to say no to things. And I think for me, one of the things that made me able to do what I am and to kind of fill so many little niches is to have had the experiences working in all the different, categories, like going on the choir trip as a percussionist, or playing in band and orchestra, or doing part of an education degree that I switched degree tracks. Taking little parts from everything that you learn, because later down the road, you don't know when you're going to need them, but you're going to need them. But I think for me and for a lot of people I know, I work conducting, I work teaching, I work composing and arranging. Sometimes I'm playing piano, sometimes I'm playing percussion. Being able to do everything means I have a broader network and can make those connections, but then also make myself more marketable.
Right. You're busy. My gosh, that's like 7 things.
I sleep too.
Right. Now let's flip that question around. Like, if someone was saying they wanted to get into music, and you could warn them of any like wrong paths to take, like what would be something where you would give good advice on something not to do?
One of the biggest things is remember that it's a small community and people have long memories. And music is a collaborative thing, and you have to always be building bridges and not burning them.
Gotcha. Yeah.
You have to really work hard at that.
Doesn't it seem like when you go and see like a great conductor that there's like a mop of gray hair? Like they're not 26 years old or whatever. Because you'd think, how did they get to be a conductor of the New York Met, or well, you know what I mean? Like, and they're 27. You just expect people of that level to be at a certain age level as well. So
sometimes,
pay your dues.
It's some pay your dues. It's a lot of having experience. One of my teachers said the best a conductor ever gets is right before they die, because that's when you have the most experience. And as long as your cognitive and physical faculties are all intact, you should be, having a really great career. I mean, look at Leonard Bernstein, though. He went into the New York Philharmonic when he was 20-something years old, and he was able to sustain that. But you still grow, you still get better, and maybe you're starting out at the New York Phil. He just got really lucky, but he was also a genius.
Right.
And there's a little bit of both that play into those things.
Right. Yeah. I can imagine. Both of those are like going hand in hand. But some geniuses also are like socially awkward and not able to there's something off-putting about them that doesn't make them they're great at what they do, but they're not great at relating to others. So it stifles their abilities sometimes.
I've worked with enough greats at this point. They all have their quirks. They're all still human. And I find that the more genius they have, the greater the quirk.
You're involved in the LGBTQ plus community. Mm-hmm. What does that mean to you?
I think that for for LGBTQ people right now, I think that that's another form of protest, is being yourself, whatever and however that means. The concert that I'm doing right now with the chorus is Glitter and Be Gay. And of course, that's a song by Leonard Bernstein, who we know was at least bisexual.
Right.
And the entire scope of the concert is that even though we're being extravagant and lots of glitter and flash and Broadway and all of that, that at a base level, the best protest that you can give the world is to glitter and be yourself.
Right, exactly.
To do what you're doing already, to be visible and proud about it, and not hide any part of you away.
I'm just wondering, where do you see your career headed, like long term, like in your 30s, 40s, 50s, or whatever? Do you want to keep with choral choir work, or do you want to like become that gray-haired conductor?
Yeah, I mean, that's always a hard question, isn't it? Because, I've been waiting 10 years to get this position, and it takes a long time, and it takes luck and knowing the right people and really being at the top of your game too. I can say that I like conducting choirs.
Right.
I didn't know that I would be good at it, but it turns out I'm pretty good at it. But, I would love to conduct more orchestras. I'd like to find more opportunities to play. I'd like to find ways to have my compositions played by, big groups and to, get some kind of recognition for that. And there are lots of avenues, and I'm open to all of them. And I think that makes it exciting. It makes it scary.
Right.
But it's also very exciting to know that there's so much opportunity to grow and to succeed.
I want to thank my guest, Spencer Zembrodt. And
thank you.
Do you have a social media page?
I do, but I also have a website.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, it's easy. SpencerZembrodt.com.
All right, and that's ZEMBRODT.com. That's right. I always feel like people that say their name, they think it's easy, and you might not hear that there's a DT like at the end of your name. Yeah. So I have to spell things for people because sometimes it's not as obvious.
It's a
to
hard
the
one.
ear as how it's spelled. All right. Thank you so much, Spencer, for being here. Thank you for watching or listening or both to another episode of Man with a Mentor.